Jack Reacher had a simple rule. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. The bus to St. Louis was just another road. He had no business in the city, no one to meet, no destination in mind beyond the bus station itself. It was a place to get a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt plastic, read a discarded newspaper, and decide whether the next bus would take him east or west. The late afternoon sun cast long, weary shadows across the grimy floor of the terminal as he found a hard plastic seat and settled in to watch the world go by. It was the man's shoes that Reacher noticed first. Expensive Italian leather, but scuffed at the toes and run down at the heels. They belonged to a man who once had money, or still did, but was running too hard to care about appearances. The man himself was a bundle of nerves, maybe 50, with a thinning comb-over and a suit that was a size too big, as if he'd lost weight recently and not by choice. He clutched a worn leather briefcase to his chest like a life preserver, his eyes darting around the terminal, never settling on one place for more than a second. He wasn't looking for someone. He was looking for everyone. Reacher categorized him as prey and went back to his coffee. It wasn't his problem. The world was full of people running from something. But then the hunters arrived. There were 3 of them. They didn't enter as a group. One came through the main doors, a tourist with a backpack and a vacant smile that didn't reach his eyes. Another materialized from the direction of the restrooms, drying his hands on his pants, looking bored. The third was already there, sitting 2 rows behind Reacher, seemingly asleep under a baseball cap. But he wasn't asleep. Reacher had clocked him 10 minutes ago. The stillness was too perfect, the posture too controlled. They moved with an unnerving synchronicity, their paths converging on the man with the scuffed shoes without ever looking at each other. They were professionals. The air in the terminal suddenly felt colder, heavier. The nervous man, Arthur Finch, as his briefcase tag read, saw it too. His scanning eyes locked onto the tourist, then the man from the restroom, and his face went white. He knew. Finch pushed himself to his feet, a strangled gasp escaping his lips. He started to walk, fast, towards the exit on the far side of the terminal. The 3 men adjusted their courses, not rushing, just tightening the net. It was a classic pincer movement, elegant in its deadliness. They were herding him towards a predetermined kill zone. Reacher stayed put. Still not his problem. He took another sip of the terrible coffee. But then Finch changed the equation. He must have seen Reacher, a mountain of a man sitting alone, an island of stillness in his river of panic. Maybe he thought Reacher was a cop, or just the biggest thing he could hide behind. Finch abruptly veered, stumbling towards Reacher's seat. The 3 hunters didn't break stride. Their expressions remained flat, neutral. This was a minor complication, nothing more. Finch tripped, his trajectory sending him sprawling right at Reacher's feet. The briefcase flew from his grasp, skidding under the seats. "Help me," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp of terror. Reacher looked down at him, then at the advancing men. The tourist was 10 yards away, the man from the restroom, 12. The sleeper was getting up, moving to cut off the exit behind them. "You've got the wrong guy," Reacher said, his voice low. No, they're going to kill me," Finch stammered, scrambling to his knees. He reached out, not for his briefcase, but for Reacher's jacket. In a movement so fast it was almost a sleight of hand, he shoved something small and hard into Reacher's deep pocket. "The key!" he hissed. "Don't let them get the key. Locker 47, Jefferson Bridge." Then he was up, pushing off Reacher and running again. But he wasn't running away. He was running at the tourist, screaming, creating a scene. It was a diversion, a desperate final act for a man who knew he was already dead. The tourist didn't even flinch. As Finch closed the distance, the tourist's hand came up. There was a soft, almost inaudible thud sound from a silenced pistol. A small, dark hole appeared in the center of Finch's forehead. He collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut, landing on the dirty floor with a sickening finality. Panic erupted in the bus station. People screamed, dove for cover, ran for the exits. The carefully controlled hunt had become a public execution. The three men ignored the chaos. Their target was down, but their mission wasn't over. All three of them, as one, turned their cold, professional eyes directly on Reacher. They had seen the handoff. Reacher didn't hesitate. He kicked the chair in front of him, sending it tumbling into the path of the nearest man. He stood, not running for the main exit with the screaming herd, but sprinting in the opposite direction, towards a set of double doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." He hit the doors with his full weight. The locks splintered and he was through, into a dimly lit concrete corridor that smelled of diesel fumes and disinfectant. He could hear their footsteps behind him, steady and relentless. They weren't panicked. They weren't rushing. They were simply coming for him. Reacher ran, his mind a cold, calculating machine. Finch was dead. A key was in his pocket. Locker 47, Jefferson Bridge. 3 professionals were on his tail, and they had just murdered a man in a crowded bus station without a flicker of emotion. This was far more than a simple mugging. The corridor ended in a heavy steel door that led out into a walled-off maintenance yard filled with dumpsters and stacks of old tires. A 6-foot chain-link fence topped with barbed wire sealed it off from the street. A dead end. A trap. He spun around as the first man came through the corridor door. It was the tourist. He still had the vacant smile, but the silenced pistol was now held in a firm, 2-handed grip. Reacher grabbed the lid of the nearest dumpster, a 200-pound slab of rusted steel, and ripped it off its hinges. He used it as a shield, charging forward. The phut of the silenced pistol was followed by the thwack of a bullet embedding itself in the thick metal. Reacher didn't slow down. He closed the 10-foot distance in 3 long strides and slammed the dumpster lid into the man's head and chest. There was a crunch of bone and a wet gasp. The man went down, his gun clattering on the asphalt. Reacher scooped up the weapon, a Glock fitted with a professional-grade suppressor. He checked the magazine, nearly full. He didn't have time to savor the small victory. The other 2 were coming. He vaulted over a stack of tires, landing silently behind a large generator. The man from the restroom and the sleeper entered the yard, moving apart to create a crossfire. They swept the area with their weapons, their movements economical and precise. Reacher stayed perfectly still, his breathing slow and shallow. He was now the prey. The yard was a box, and they were the exterminators. But Reacher had one advantage. They thought he was just some civilian who had stumbled into their path. They thought he was an accountant, a salesman, a drifter. They didn't know he was a hunter himself. The sleeper, the one with the baseball cap, moved cautiously towards the dumpsters, his partner covering him from near the corridor door. Reacher watched him, tracking his every move. The man was good. He stayed low, using the limited cover effectively. Reacher needed to separate them. He picked up a loose piece of concrete from the ground and tossed it high and far over the generator. It landed with a clatter on the metal roof of a small maintenance shed on the far side of the yard. As expected, the sleeper spun towards the sound, raising his weapon. In that split second of distraction, Reacher moved. He burst from behind the generator, not at the sleeper, but at the other man, the one from the restroom, who was now focused on the shed. Reacher covered the 20 feet of open ground before the man could react. He didn't aim for the head or chest. He fired one shot from the silenced Glock, aiming low. The bullet took the man in the knee. The man screamed, a raw, piercing sound that was immediately cut short as he crumpled to the ground. The sleeper spun back, firing 2 quick shots. Reacher was already diving, rolling behind the dumpsters. Bullets sparked off the metal where he had been a second before. 1 down, 1 wounded, 1 left. The sleeper was the most dangerous. He hadn't panicked. He immediately moved to a better position behind a stack of oil drums, his weapon trained on Reacher's last known location. The wounded man on the ground was trying to raise his own pistol, his face a mask of pain. Reacher fired again, another single, precise shot from the Glock. The wounded man's hand went limp. He wasn't dead, but he was out of the fight. Now it was a duel. Reacher versus the sleeper. The sirens in the distance were growing louder. The police were coming. That meant the sleeper had a deadline. He would get more aggressive. "You're a dead man," the sleeper called out, his voice calm, professional. You have something that doesn't belong to you. Give it to me, and I'll make it quick." Reacher didn't answer. He was scanning the yard, planning his next move. The generator, the tires, the fence. The high fence was an obstacle, but it could also be a tool. He broke from cover, running not towards the sleeper, but directly at the chain-link fence. The sleeper fired, and Reacher felt a burning sting as a bullet grazed his arm. He ignored it. He hit the fence and began to climb, his powerful legs and arms pulling him up with incredible speed. The sleeper ran after him, firing as he went. Bullets whizzed past Reacher's head, punching holes in the wire mesh. He reached the top, the barbed wire tearing at his clothes and skin. He didn't try to go over it. Instead, he used his momentum to push off, launching himself backwards, over the sleeper's head. He landed hard on the asphalt behind the man, his knees absorbing the shock. The sleeper was already turning, his pistol coming around, but Reacher was too close. He drove his shoulder into the man's midsection, lifting him off his feet and slamming him into the side of the dumpster. The man's gun went flying. The sleeper was tough. He grunted and lashed out with an elbow, catching Reacher in the temple. Stars exploded in Reacher's vision. The man followed up with a knee to the gut that drove the air from Reacher's lungs. Reacher staggered back, gasping. The man in the baseball cap smiled. He was a fighter. "Big mistake," he said, and launched a series of fast, brutal punches. Reacher blocked most of them, the impacts jarring his arms to the bone. This man was trained, special forces maybe, or something like it. Reacher weathered the storm, giving ground, letting the man overcommit. As the sleeper threw a powerful right cross, Reacher ducked under it, pivoted, and drove his own elbow into the man's ribs. He heard a satisfying crack. The man grunted in pain, his attack faltering for just a moment. It was all the opening Reacher needed. He grabbed the man by the front of his shirt, hauled him forward, and slammed his forehead into the man's nose. Bone and cartilage gave way with a wet crunch. The man screamed, staggering back, blood pouring from his face. Reacher stepped in and delivered a final, devastating blow to the side of the man's head. The sleeper dropped like a stone and didn't move. Silence descended on the yard, broken only by the whimpering of the man with the shattered knee and the approaching howl of sirens. Reacher stood over the unconscious man, his chest heaving. He took a moment, letting the adrenaline recede. He checked the graze on his arm. It was bleeding, but it was superficial. He quickly searched the sleeper. He found a wallet with no ID, just a thick wad of cash, a set of car keys, a silenced pistol identical to the one he'd taken from the tourist, and a small, encrypted radio. He pocketed the keys and the radio. He couldn't stay here. The police would arrive any second. They would find 3 shot or beaten men and 1 dead body inside. They would have questions, and Reacher had no time for questions. He had a key in his pocket and a promise to a dead man. He looked at the fence. Climbing it was an option, but it was slow and exposed. He looked at the gate. It was secured by a heavy chain and a padlock. He picked up the sleeper's gun, aimed carefully, and blew the lock apart. The chain fell away. He slipped through the gate into a narrow alleyway, just as the first police cars screeched to a halt at the front of the bus terminal. He walked, not ran, down the alley, melting into the urban landscape. He ditched the Glock in a storm drain. Guns brought complications he didn't need. His hands were weapon enough. He found the sleeper's car, a nondescript black sedan, parked 2 blocks away. The keys worked. Inside the car, it was clean, sterile. Except for a GPS unit. He turned it on. The history showed one recurring address, a warehouse down by the river, a base of operations. He turned on the radio he'd taken. It was silent for a moment, then a calm voice crackled to life. Team 1, report. Is the package secure? Reacher didn't answer. A pause, then the voice again, colder this time. Team 1, what is your status? Acknowledge. Silence. Reacher started the car and pulled out into traffic, heading not for Jefferson Bridge but for the warehouse. The hunters had a nest, and Reacher was going to burn it down. He needed to know who they were and why they wanted Finch dead. Knowing the why was everything. It turned a random act of violence into a campaign. And right now, Reacher felt like starting a campaign. The warehouse was a massive, decaying brick structure in a forgotten industrial sector of the city. Rusting train tracks led to loading bays with doors that had been sealed for decades. Reacher parked the sedan a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, using the shadows of other derelict buildings as cover. The GPS had led him to the right place. A single light burned in a second-story window. He circled the building, his eyes scanning for entrances, exits, and security. There were no cameras, but the windows on the ground floor were boarded up tight. There was one steel door at the rear, probably the main point of entry. It would be watched. He found what he was looking for, a rusted fire escape that ran up the side of the building, ending just below the roofline. It looked ancient, but the bolts holding it to the brick seemed solid enough. He tested the lowest rung. It held his weight. Silently, he began to climb. The radio crackled again. All teams, converge on the terminal. Police are on site. Asset is compromised. Secondary objective is now primary. Locate the package. Use any means necessary. The package was him, or more accurately, the key in his pocket. He reached the second-story level and paused, peering through a grimy window into a vast open space. The interior was mostly empty, filled with dust and shadows. In the center, under a single hanging work light, two men stood over a large table covered with maps and surveillance photos. One of the photos was a clear shot of Arthur Finch. Another was of the bus station layout. One of the men was talking into a radio, the same calm, cold voice from before. He was the leader. The other was built like a heavyweight boxer, his head shaved, a tattoo of a coiled serpent on his neck. "They're not responding," the leader said, putting the radio down. Something went wrong. Either the police have them, or the package fought back. "No civilian fights back against our guys," Serpent Neck grunted. "This might not be a civilian," the leader replied, his voice thoughtful. The handoff was sloppy. Finch was desperate. He could have passed it to anyone. Reacher continued his climb, moving past the window and up towards the roof. He needed a better way in. The roof offered options: skylights, ventilation shafts. He found a large, square ventilation hatch secured with a simple hasp. He used the butt of the sleeper's heavy pistol, which he'd decided to keep after all, to smash the rusted lock. It broke with a dull clang. He eased the hatch open and peered down into darkness. He could smell stagnant air and damp. It likely led to the building's ventilation system. It would be a tight squeeze, but it was a way in. He lowered himself into the shaft, the metal groaning under his weight. He moved slowly, his back against one side, his feet against the other, inching his way along the horizontal duct. It was pitch black and claustrophobic. After about 50 feet, he saw a faint light filtering through a grate below him. He was directly over the main room. He lay flat, his ear close to the grate. The leader was speaking again. "Doesn't matter. The key is all that matters. Finch copied the master ledger. Everything is on that drive. If it gets out, Mr. Kleiner is finished. We're finished." "So we find the man from the station," Serpent Neck said. "We sweep the city. He can't have gone far." "He's smarter than that," the leader countered. "He took out 3 of our best men. He didn't just run. He neutralized them and vanished. This is not a random target. This is someone with skills. Check the bus station security footage. Find out who he is." Reacher now had a name, Kleiner, and a purpose, a ledger on a drive. The key wasn't for the drive itself, but for the locker that held it. He pressed his weight onto the grate. It was old, held in place by 4 rusted bolts. He drew the silenced pistol and, using the suppressor as a lever, began to work on the first bolt. It was slow, painstaking work. The metal creaked and groaned. Down below, Serpent Neck looked up. "Did you hear that?" "It's an old building," the leader said dismissively. "Rats." The first bolt gave way. Reacher moved to the second. He had to time his movements with the occasional sounds from outside. A distant train horn, the wind rattling a loose piece of sheet metal. The second bolt snapped, then the third. He put all his pressure on the final corroded bolt. It held for a moment, then sheared off with a sharp crack. The grate gave way. Reacher dropped the 10 feet to the floor, landing in a crouch on the table below, sending maps and photos scattering. The two men stared at him, their faces a mask of pure shock. The shock lasted for a second. Serpent Neck was the first to react, reaching for a pistol holstered at the small of his back. The leader was smarter. He kicked the table over, trying to unbalance Reacher while diving for cover. Reacher didn't give Serpent Neck the chance to draw his weapon. As the table tilted, Reacher launched himself forward, a human missile aimed at the big man. He crashed into him, driving him backwards into a steel support pillar. The impact was immense. The man's head hit the steel with a sickening thud. He slumped to the ground, unconscious. The leader had his gun out now, firing from behind a stack of crates. Bullets chewed up the wooden tabletop where Reacher had been. Reacher rolled, coming up behind the overturned table, the sleeper's pistol in his hand. It was another duel. A room full of shadows and two men with guns. "You've made a terrible mistake," the leader called out, his voice still unnervingly calm. "That key will bring you nothing but death." "It's already brought death to a man named Finch," Reacher yelled back, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "And 3 of your men. Looks like it's your turn." Reacher scanned his surroundings. Crates, pillars, a staircase leading to a darkened upper level. He fired 2 shots at the leader's position to keep his head down, then sprinted for the stairs. He took them 3 at a time, the metal steps clanging under his boots. From the upper catwalk, he had a better view. The leader was moving, slipping between the shadows, trying to flank him. Reacher saw a heavy chain hoist hanging from a ceiling girder. A plan began to form. He moved along the catwalk, making noise, drawing the leader's attention. He saw a flicker of movement below. The leader was taking the bait, positioning himself for a clear shot. Reacher unhooked the chain from its safety catch. It was heavy, greasy, and perfect. He waited. The leader stepped out from behind a pillar, his gun raised. Reacher released the chain. It plummeted downwards, 100 pounds of steel and rust. The leader looked up, his eyes wide with surprise, just as the heavy block and hook crashed down on him. He was driven to the concrete floor, his weapon skittering away across the room. Reacher came down the stairs, his gun trained on the spot. The leader was alive, pinned under the hoist, his legs crushed. He glared up at Reacher with pure, unadulterated hatred. "Who is Kleiner?" Reacher asked, his voice flat. The leader just spat blood onto the floor. "You're dead." "Not yet," Reacher said. He walked over to the man, knelt, and efficiently searched him. He found a high-end smartphone. He put it in his pocket. He looked at the man's crushed legs. "You won't be going anywhere. The police will be here eventually. Maybe you can explain to them who Mr. Kleiner is." Reacher left him there. He went back to the unconscious Serpent Neck and found his car keys. A different car, which was good. He took the man's wallet and pistol as well. You could never have too many options. He walked out the back door of the warehouse into the cool night air. The city was quiet here. He found the second car, an SUV this time, and got in. He took out the leader's phone. It was password protected, but the SIM card wasn't. He popped the SIM out and put it in the cheap burner phone he'd bought a week ago in Omaha. He powered it on. The contact list was full of single-letter designators. K was at the top. He dialed the number. A man answered on the first ring, his voice smooth and powerful. "Is it done?" "No," Reacher said. "It's just beginning. Finch is dead. So are 4 of your men. Your operation is blown." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Who is this?" "The man with the key," Reacher said. "You must be Kleiner. Your cleanup crew failed. Now you have to deal with me." "What do you want?" Kleiner asked, his voice strained. "Money? Name your price." "I want to know why an accountant in scuffed shoes was so important that you'd kill him in a public place." There was a long pause. "You don't understand what you're involved in," Kleiner said, a new menace in his tone. That drive contains information that can destabilize powerful institutions. It's a matter of national security. It sounded more like a personal ledger to me, Reacher said. Something that would put you in a cage for a very long time. Meet me, Kleiner said suddenly. Jefferson Bridge, North Tower, midnight. Come alone with the key. We can resolve this. You'll walk away a rich man. It was a trap. Of course it was a trap. But it was also an invitation, an endpoint. I'll be there, Reacher said and hung up. He had a few hours until midnight. He drove to an all-night diner, ordered a black coffee and a full stack of pancakes. He ate slowly, methodically. He thought about Arthur Finch, a man who had stumbled into something too big for him, tried to do the right thing, and paid the ultimate price. His last act on Earth was to put a key in a stranger's pocket and trust him. Reacher had no intention of letting that trust be misplaced. He drove to the Jefferson Bridge with an hour to spare. It was an old industrial steel bridge, closed to traffic for repairs, perfect for a clandestine meeting. He parked the SUV half a mile away and walked the rest, staying in the shadows. He didn't go to the North Tower. He went to the South Tower, climbing the maintenance ladder up into the steel latticework. From here, he had a perfect vantage point of the entire bridge. He lay flat on a wide girder, the cold wind whipping around him, and waited. Just before midnight, a black town car pulled up to the north end of the bridge. 2 men got out. One was older, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. Kleiner. The other was a large bodyguard. They walked to the base of the North Tower and waited. Minutes passed. Kleiner was getting impatient. He checked his watch. Then Reacher saw them. 2 more men positioned on the catwalks below the bridge deck. Snipers. They had rifles, trained on the meeting spot. Kleiner hadn't come to negotiate. He'd come to kill whoever showed up and take the key from their corpse. Reacher had anticipated this. He hadn't brought a gun. He'd brought a heavy wrench he'd found in the SUV's toolkit. He began to move, silent as a ghost, through the steel skeleton of the bridge. He made his way down to the catwalk level on the opposite side from the first sniper. The wind and the groaning of the old bridge covered the sound of his movements. He came up behind the first sniper. The man was completely focused on the North Tower through his night vision scope. He never heard Reacher, a single, precise blow with the wrench to the back of his head, and he crumpled without a sound. Reacher took the rifle. It was a high-powered military-grade weapon. He crossed to the other side of the bridge, under the road deck. The second sniper was getting nervous. He was speaking quietly into a radio. "No sign of him, sir. The area is cold." "Stay alert," Kleiner's voice crackled back. Reacher was 20 feet away. He raised the rifle, looked through the scope. He could see Kleiner perfectly, his face illuminated by the distant city lights. He could end it right here. 1 shot. But that wasn't justice. That was an execution. He shifted his aim. He found the second sniper in his scope. He didn't aim for the man's head. He aimed for the rifle in his hands. He squeezed the trigger. The high-velocity round struck the sniper's weapon, shattering it into a shower of metal and plastic fragments. The man screamed, clutching his mangled hands. Up on the bridge, Kleiner and his bodyguard spun around at the sound. "What was that?" Kleiner yelled. "Contact!" the wounded sniper yelled back. "He's on the bridge!" Reacher dropped the rifle into the dark water below and started running. He ran up the maintenance stairs, bursting onto the main deck of the bridge. He was 100 yards from Kleiner. The bodyguard drew a pistol and started firing. Reacher zigzagged, using the bridge girders for cover. The bullets sparked and ricocheted off the steel around him. Kleiner was screaming at his man, "Kill him! Kill him!" The bodyguard was good. He advanced steadily, firing controlled pairs. Reacher was pinned down. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the sleeper's car keys. He held them up. "Looking for this, Kleiner?" he shouted, his voice carrying over the wind. Kleiner stopped. "The key!" "No, not the key," Reacher said. "But now I have your attention." He threw the car keys high into the air off the side of the bridge. For a split second, both the bodyguard and Kleiner looked up, following the glint of metal. It was the opening Reacher needed. He burst from cover, closing the distance at a dead sprint. The bodyguard turned back and fired, but it was too late. Reacher crashed into him like a freight train. The gun went off, the bullet flying harmlessly into the night sky. Reacher drove the man back, picked him up, and threw him over the side of the bridge. He hit the water with a distant splash. Now it was just Reacher and Kleiner. Kleiner was terrified. His arrogance was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a man who had always paid others to do his dirty work. He fumbled inside his expensive suit, pulling out a small silver-plated pistol. "Stay back!" he shrieked, his hands trembling. Reacher kept walking towards him, his pace steady, relentless. "You sent 5 men to their deaths for a key, Kleiner. You had a man named Finch executed in a bus station, all for a ledger." "You don't know anything," Kleiner stammered, backing away. "I know enough," Reacher said. He was 10 feet away now. "I know you're the kind of man who thinks he's above the law, the kind of man who thinks money can solve any problem." "I'll give you anything," Kleiner pleaded. "Millions." "You're going to give me the locker key," Reacher said, holding out his hand. "Wait." Reacher checked his own pocket. The key Finch had given him was still there. What was Kleiner talking about? Then he understood. Kleiner didn't have the locker key. The locker key was the prize. Kleiner thought Reacher had found the locker and was now bringing the drive itself to the meeting. The whole negotiation was a sham based on a misunderstanding. But Reacher just held his hand out, playing along. "Give me the key, Kleiner." Kleiner, confused and panicked, pointed the trembling pistol at Reacher's chest. "I don't have it. I thought you did." Reacher stopped. He looked at the pathetic, frightened man. He had him. He could take the gun, break him, leave him for the authorities. He simply said, "Bang." Kleiner flinched and pulled the trigger. The click of the hammer falling on an empty chamber was deafening in the silence. The man must have fired his last round without realizing it. Reacher had counted the shots. Reacher closed the final few feet, took the gun from Kleiner's limp hand and tucked it into his belt. He then hit Kleiner once, a single precise punch to the jaw. The man's eyes rolled back and he collapsed. Reacher stood over him, the wind whistling through the steel bridge. He took the key from his own pocket. Locker 47, Jefferson Bridge. He looked around. This was the Jefferson Bridge. The locker had to be somewhere here. He found it. A small maintenance locker built into the base of the south tower. The key slid in perfectly. He turned it, and the rusty door swung open. Inside was a single padded envelope. Reacher opened it. There was a small, military-grade encrypted USB drive. Arthur Finch's legacy. He took out the leader's phone, put the SIM back in, and found a number that wasn't a single letter. It was labeled N. Helton, FBI. A contingency plan? An insurance policy? He dialed it. A woman with a sharp, no-nonsense voice answered. "Helton. My name is Jack Reacher," he said. "I have a USB drive that I believe belongs to you. It concerns a man named Kleiner. I'm leaving it on top of a maintenance box at the south tower of the Jefferson Bridge. I suggest you get here before someone else does. You'll also find Kleiner himself at the north tower. He's had a little accident." He didn't wait for a reply. He hung up, wiped the phone clean, and dropped it into the river. He walked off the bridge and back to the SUV. His work was done. He drove out of St. Louis heading west, not looking back. The sun would be up in a few hours. Time to find another town, another cup of bad coffee, and another road to nowhere.